Welcome to the Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin podcast. We present cold case crimes that we feel can and should be solved with your help. We provide the facts of the case and the research that we have done. Then web sleuths like you help us solve the mystery and provide the victim, family, community, and law enforcement with justice and peace of mind. This is Solve Crimes.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, Gavin. It's an interesting episode we got here.
This episode is very different than what we've done in the past, and I'm excited about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, me too. It's different because we're not really telling a story here as before. We're actually doing an exclusive interview.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have been like really thankful. Whatever we're doing, you know, in the podcast and on this YouTube channel, we're hitting some type of a nerve, and we're getting people that we really are amazed to hear from contact us.
Yeah. And just a little inside baseball for our listeners and viewers. When we were thinking about starting this thing, Rick is a little bit more of a dreamer than I am. And I'm a little bit more earthbound. He told me that, if we do this right, people are going to just come out of the woodwork and they're going to tell us their stories and all that stuff. And I went,
yeah, right.
Right. But it's happening, and it started happening almost immediately.
Now
we've had some characters reach out to us.
Yes.
But if we have to sift through the characters to find the diamonds, like
and
this
we have
person.
2 diamonds coming up this episode and our next one.
Yeah, totally worth it.
Very much worth it. Our reaction to both of them was like, what?
Yeah.
So
who are we talking to today?
Yeah. So this episode, I got a friend request on Facebook. Within a minute of me getting that friend request, I got a message from him, and he said, "Hey, Rick, please give me a call. My name is Michael Willis. I'm the son of Ray Willis."
And of course, Ray Willis, we all know as Raymond Willis, right? That's what's printed.
Judy's fiancé.
Judy's fiancé.
So Michael told us not only the interview is fascinating, and he gave us information that we could not have gotten anywhere else.
And he gave us several attaboys. Like he has gone over the years and kind of looked up information, and there's been a lot of misinformation out there. And he gave us a couple attaboys, but he did correct us a couple times, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. And when he first reached out to me, the first thing he said was that he thought that we were doing a really great job, and he thought that we were doing, we're doing right by Judy and his dad, which I thought was cool. So, first thing out of the gate, he tells us that this entire time, all these months of research and all the recordings that we've done, we've been saying Judy's last name wrong.
That is correct.
Yes.
So it is not Hakari.
Right.
It is Hakari.
Hakari. And
now,
when
took me by surprise a little bit.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you, when you told me that, I said, "Oh, great." Because we've been saying it wrong in all these videos, and of course we have to correct it. And I said, "Great, now we're going to have to eat crow."
Right.
so
it was like a half a beat later, I understood your joke. So yeah, this is us eating crow. So what was really funny about that is I spoke with a personal friend of Bill and Evelyn Hakari.
Well, you were kind of hoping that he was wrong.
I was hoping he was wrong because she said
you had to do your own research. Yeah.
And so I think she was probably just she had heard me say Hakari, and so she was saying it that way so that I didn't feel bad about it. But I know many people who are multilingual, 2 of which speak Finnish. I reached out to one of them.
What are the odds?
And the odds are great in my circle of friends because we all served as missionaries when we were young, right? So
Gotcha. So you got
anyway,
instant feedback that
I got instant feedback. It's
that
Hakari.
of course,
That is
yeah.
how we
And
pronounce Judy's
my
name.
response to you telling me that, because you're like, yeah, it is said like that. And I said, well, Michael's dad was engaged to her. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't say her name correctly.
He's like, why would you even question that?
Exactly.
It's kind of who
So
I
that
am.
was interesting. The other thing that was very funny, I thought, he said, oh, and by the way, the picture of my dad you have on your website. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's not my dad. So,
yeah, he's a good-looking guy. He's just not my dad.
Guy, but just not my dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
he's provided us with a couple photos of Ray.
Yes, we now have photos. I actually have put those up today. So what was really great, without saying what Michael actually says, but what was really great is that, the path that we have been on, and we kind of naturally wanted to humanize these victims instead of just being a name in the newspaper. We wanted to humanize them. So we gathered information, spoke to as many people as we could. And we, like with Judy, talked about her aspirations, and her dad spoke highly of her ideals and her determination and independence and all that. So so that's how we've been presenting them. And it's amazing to get Michael's information, because unbeknownst to us, his father had told him a lot of this information. Unfortunately, Ray passed away in 2016.
Yeah.
But Michael had been raised hearing these stories, and as you can imagine,
he was even taken to the Hakari home when he was young for like dinners and stuff like that. The Hakari home.
Yes. Okay. Good.
So yeah. I guess that's probably a good place to just get into the interview, right?
Yeah. So Michael gives us a perspective that we never, ever, ever could have imagined getting. And and I think everybody watching, if you've been following the Judith Hakari case, you're going to find this information fascinating, and literally nowhere else will you find this information.
Well, I mean, my father, he grew up here in the Sacramento area, grew up on San Francisco Boulevard, over off close to 14th Avenue. Went to high school at Christian Brothers, finished his last year at Hiram Johnson. From there, he wanted to become a teacher, so he went to Sacramento State University. That was what my grandfather wanted him to do. He had two other sets that were older. They didn't go to college. One was a baseball player for the San Francisco Seals, and he wanted to have that one scholastic child, I guess. So he wanted my dad to be an educator. So my father, he went and got his bachelor's degree. During this time, he met Judy Hakari. And they were together from what I mean, he hasn't really said any specific dates, but, the way he talks about it, I want to say that they were together for at least 2 or 3 years. I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't a summer thing, Right. So they were obviously engaged to be married, and, 1970 changed an awful lot for my father and his future. So as a boy growing up, it wasn't something that I was aware of. I'd say probably for the first maybe 10 to 11 years of my existence. I mean, there were different little things that, looking back at now, I understand, what was going on, such as, I have an older sister. She didn't, she passed away, in the womb as a stillbirth.
Oh, man.
So, but she's buried out there at the Calvary Cemetery, out in, I think that's like in the Citrus Heights area.
Yeah.
And whenever we would go out to, the cemetery, we would obviously go ahead and put some flowers, on my sister's grave. And he would always take us on over to this other area where was a mausoleum. And he would put flowers on this other grave. And as a little boy, I didn't know who that was or what the story was behind it. I just knew that it was somebody who was really important to my father at some point.
Wow.
And then later on, I found out that my father was engaged to be married, and unfortunately, his engagement didn't happen, based on the fact that his fiancé was murdered, Right. So he didn't really, it's not one of those times where I think somebody sits down and gives you a complete story of, what happened from A, to Z. It was kind of like piecemealed, over the course of, me growing up. So I knew basically to begin with that my father had, somebody that, he was going to be engaged to that had been murdered. The specifics, wasn't really something that was shared with us.
Your dad passed in 2016?
Yeah, he
Okay.
passed away this month in 2016.
Wow.
Right around, 69 years of age. Probably a heart attack or stroke. We don't know which, but I think it was more than likely a heart attack. But
Right. And he did become a teacher? Is that what his career was?
so after everything happened with Judy and he got his degree, he tried to go through law school for a little while. He was going to McGeorge, and he just at that time, from what he's told me, it was a real dark time for him. I mean, it was about, I would say, I think he was about 23, when all this happened, and he married my mother, I believe, when he was about 28, so it was that 5-year period of time.
Oh, okay.
The first couple of years, were real hard on him. And he stayed real close in contact, with Hakari family. He would, go over and have Sunday dinners, and him and Judy's older brother, Michael, who I'm actually named after. They were really close, in fact.
Wow.
They even after her passing, they would go fishing, up in up Highway 50 and the Feather River, and so they did pal around an awful lot, even after that. And like I was saying before, my dad used to take me and my other brother, just to go visit the Hakaris, and we were really tiny. I don't really have much recollection of it, but he did try to stay in touch. But when I asked him, I says, I don't really remember going, to those, dinners. He says, well, you were really little. I'm like, well, why did you stop? He told me that the reason why is that, he just kind of felt bad going there, especially with a couple of kids, knowing that, he was set to marry his daughter, and well, these could have been his grandkids, not.
Yeah.
Right. I know that's gotta be, it's such a tough situation all around for everybody, including you and certainly, Judy's brother. I mean, everybody. It's just such a rough scenario.
I'm a father of 5 myself. I have 3 daughters, so just the thought of, somebody doing that to one of my kids, or if somebody.
Right.
No,
like
it's
that.
Frightening. It's absolutely.
Yeah, you really.
frightening.
We can sit here and say, geez, that must have been horrible, but there's no way we would.
Yeah, we don't understand.
Yeah. Man, that's a lot of information that is incredible to us. I mean, it also says a lot about Ray and his character, right?
Yeah. The I guess the saddest part about that to me is the whole idea that he would go and visit Bill and Evelyn with his boys in tow and kind of feel like I'm bringing them down because these 2 boys could have been their grandchildren.
Well, I mean, how could they not see that? But it sounds like for 10 plus years, he was getting together with them. They clearly thought highly of him. And clearly, in my opinion, they did not suspect him of anything, as far as his involvement. But it was really nice to hear, and the fact that Michael was named after Judy's older brother. That's
brother.
Wow. I mean, that's just
who
incredible.
We understand is still living.
And I also believe he's in the Sacramento area still.
Yeah, we would love to be in contact.
We'd love to talk to him.
sometime.
We haven't searched him out because, again, we're kind of sensitive to these things, and we don't want to be that the guys that bring up bad memories. But we would be very interested in speaking with him. And
it is a little different if somebody reaches out to us and wants to talk to us. But
exactly.
it is hard to reach out
doors.
and knock on the door. Hey, we'd really like to talk to you about 50 years ago when your life was, split in 2. Kind of.
Right. Well, I mean, if somebody knows him, if he was interested in speaking with us, I mean, it would absolutely be more out of respect for Judy and we'd be
folks,
more interested in hearing who Judy was from her brother's perspective, which would be very, very interesting and helpful. But yeah, this information from Michael, I mean, it clearly shows, because we, up until talking to Michael, we did not know how it affected. We knew it would have, of course, affect Ray's life.
Affect him, sure.
But it's interesting to hear. It took him years to really get into another serious relationship, and he had a rough time. Didn't Michael liken it to like PTSD?
I think when we talked to him the first time, that's something, another little inside baseball. We talked with Michael kind of off the record for an hour and a half or so before we
the first night,
the first time, and then we decided to record the interview when he gave us permission to do that.
Yep.
So he talked about his dad was suffering from post-traumatic stress.
Right. Yeah, that would have been pretty rough. So let's get back in and hear the rest of what Michael has to say.
I wanted to ask you questions about what you know about the night that Judy Hakari went missing. What was going on at that time?
So the way that my father tells it is that he was working on a master's thesis at the time, late, as he was going to Sac State. He got a phone call from Judy, who was still at the hospital at the time. She invited him over, over at the Markston Apartments. It was kind of late, because it was, I think, getting on at 11 o'clock. But she had suggested that maybe, it would be not a bad idea to come on over. She would make him a breakfast. And so he said, okay, that's fine. He had a key. And so he drove over in his Super Beetle and let himself in. She was going to go to the grocery store. I think it was a Lucky's, if I remember, correctly, because they were open up late. And she was going to pick up some food, basically a breakfast for dinner kind of a situation. And she would meet him over at the apartment, So he got there, let himself in, sat down, started watching TV. And then after, about an hour and a half, almost, 2 hours goes by, he starts to get worried. So he calls up the hospital because, as a nurse, sometimes, if there's an emergency that happens and you think you're leaving, you don't leave, you wind up staying.
Right.
He thought that maybe that's what was her situation. And so they told her that she had left on time, which at this point, worried my father. And we're talking about a day and age where, you can't just call somebody on a cell phone to check up on them.
Right.
If they don't show up, then they don't show up.
Right.
And so he went on down to where she parks her car, and he found her vehicle. And at first, I remember him saying that, he felt, felt like, okay, well, there she is. But as soon as he got a little closer to the car, he started noticing things. The door was, open. Her car keys were on the ground. There were some buttons, that were, all over the place, from her jacket, and that he'd found some rags, that this shouldn't have been there. And at that point, he was concerned, called up his mother, my grandmother, and then she advised to call the police. So he called the police and told them, that, this is a situation. So they sent, a couple squad cars out. He also, I believe, called their parents or her parents, just to let her know that, hey, she's gone and her car is here. And they searched, I guess, a field, that was close to the Markston apartment complex, just to see if maybe they would, find anything out there. But, they didn't find anything, unfortunately.
Now, is this kind of information that was pieced together over the course of your life, or did you ever have a conversation with your dad where he told you the story?
He's told me the story probably a couple of times. I almost felt like it was somewhat therapeutic for him, to kind of, to explain what happened at that time.
What you've told us so far, if I can kind of recap, there's a couple of gems that we can pull out of there that isn't anywhere in any news article that we've read. The first is he was expecting her to be a little late because she was going to stop at the grocery store and get some groceries for breakfast for dinner. Right. And then the second thing is some people, they criticize the gap between the time he went down and saw the car and the time that he called the police. It was like 15 minutes, right? What you just said was he called his mom. Like, what do I do, mom? Kind of a thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Rick, this is I'm glad we're stopping here, because this is something that is not in any report anywhere that we can find. The fact that Ray was expecting Judy to be late, right? Because she was going to stop to pick up groceries to have like a breakfast for dinner with Ray.
Right. We've never heard that. And
I'd always kind of questioned, and you and I in private talking, we would ask each other, why did it take Ray until 1:45 to go out and see if she's parked somewhere in the parking lot?
Right.
But and we always kind of chalked it up to, well, it's the time, you can't call cell phones and all that stuff. But now we know that he was expecting her to be
call the hospital before he went out there. So to his credit.
Yes, and we always assumed that, but I don't remember ever reading that. And I'm glad that Mike told us that he had called the hospital.
Right.
So anyway, I looked it up. There's really no convenient grocery store between Judy's work and her apartment. So she either would have had to go back towards Sacramento or past the apartment.
But here's the thing that we kind of just talked about that we're both curious about. There's no mention of any groceries being found in the car.
That is correct. No
that
groceries.
Does not seem like something that a killer would, hang on a second, let me get the groceries. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Ooh, I love bananas. Yeah.
Right. or I love breakfast.
Right.
So we kind of speculated between us. It could be that, she had just worked a long shift. Maybe she wanted to come and change and ask, because again, there's no texting or cell phones. So she may have decided to come home because if what we're saying is right, you'd have to pass her apartment to go to the grocery store. So she may have just stopped off to ask him, like you were saying, hey, you want eggs or, sausage or bacon or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe she wanted to change out of her nurse's uniform to go to the grocery store. So that's very plausible.
Or she went back to there was a Lucky supermarket on Alhambra, I want to say. Now it's a Safeway. There was also a Lucky supermarket on, it was either Alta Arden or Arden Way.
Right.
Which is now a Safeway, right? So the one on Arden, that would be past her apartment.
I think that pretty much answers it. I don't want to read too much into that. I don't, there's no indication that that's a giant factor, but it is interesting.
Yeah. So Ray calls the hospital, was told that she left on time, now gets worried. Now, one of the other questions that I have had is...
Well, he still gave her a little bit of...
Gave her a little time. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
But one of the other questions that I've had this whole time that we've been looking into Judy's disappearance was, why does it take so long to call the police after you discover what looks like a crime scene? It looks like a struggle.
Now we know he spoke to his mom.
Yeah.
And, that may not have been a 2-minute phone call. She may have asked him, if you called your mom and you were that age, I'm sure, before saying call the police, you would ask, when was the last time you talked to her and how, where was she going? Was she doing that? That kind of a thing probably happened. And then she suggested he called the police, and then he also, called the Hakari. So,
yeah. And, I look back to when I was 23 years old, and of course I was not a graduate student, so I obviously wasn't as smart as Ray, but at 23, I think that's a perfectly natural thing. Like, I don't know what to do next. What do I do? I'm going to call my mom. She'll know.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So everything, as you and I have said, and Michael acknowledged when we first spoke with him, when he reached out, that we've kind of gave Ray the benefit of the doubt, and everything that he did in even the timeline before we knew about the known delay, it just didn't seem, what's the motive? There's just no motive. And it just didn't make any sense. And the things that he told Michael growing up, you can tell it was a guy who was processing a giant event in his life. For him to continually talk about those details, with his son growing up. So,
yeah. Well, let's get back into it.
We covered the whole situation where she had a first floor apartment because she was refurbishing a family piano, and you had mentioned to us that your dad actually blamed that piano on him not being able to see the parking lot because he wanted her to be in an upstairs apartment, right? Just for safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so had it not been for the piano, she'd have been on the second floor and he would have been able to look down and possibly have seen something happening and could have stopped it, which, I mean, a lot of people have that kind of guilt, so it makes sense. But that was an interesting thing you had pointed out.
Yeah, he kind of blamed that, and I told him, I says, the reality of it is you can always play a Monday morning quarterback with just about anything, that happens in life. And the reality of it is, hindsight's 20/20, and let's just use that as a hypothetical. What if you could see that, she was being, taken? I think that anybody, naturally would try to go down and stop it. I mean, that's just the way it is. But if you got three guys, what's the possibilities of them either, overpowering you or them having a gun? I mean, you might have been able to make an attempt to stop it, but who's to say you would have been successful at it, so.
Right. And it was probably super quick. And if he was watching TV, the odds of him looking out the window right at the time, right? I mean, that's also pretty slim.
Right. Exactly.
I bet it was so fast.
Yeah, it happened fast. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
I mean, unless he was standing there, looking down, watching out his window the entire time.
Right. Right.
There was,
Now, one of the things that we kind of surmised, we kind of guessed when reading through all of the articles that we could find was that your dad was kind of above reproach, right? That nobody ever suspected him. They went busy looking for Judy, but was that the case?
No, not to begin with. I've read a lot of articles, since, and it seems like, for the most part, the articles have, kind of exonerated him, as being not, the suspect. But I do remember him telling me that, for that first 7 weeks of that investigation before they had a body, that they were bringing him in on a regular basis, downtown.
So that was new to us. We did not know that.
Yeah. He, and they were really pressuring him, and he told me that, they had him scared, with the things that they were saying. They were pretty much talking to me as though I had done it, and that they just, come on, let's stop, let's stop kidding ourselves. Just tell us what you did with the body, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Oh, man.
That must have been really tough.
And I'm like, I couldn't imagine putting myself in that position, here my fiance is missing and the police are looking at me, when I think you should be out looking for her and whoever did this. He was still living at home at the time that this all happened. I was going to college. And what he did was he got a map, of kind of Northern California area and a protractor and figured out about how far one could drive and then get back. It would fit that timeline. And so when he got this protractor, he drew a big circle, on the map. And then my grandfather happened to walk in, and he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Look," he says, "they really think it's me, and I feel like based on the time that, she went missing, up until the point of when I made a phone call, this is about the distance that I could go and come back. If she's found anywhere within this radius, I'm going to be still, being looked at, as possibly the person that did this, so they found
that's a dramatic, scene that you paint there, I mean,
we can't even imagine just how frightening that would be, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I guess the emotion, the conflicting emotions, right? Like I really want them to find my fiance, but I don't want them to think that I did anything, so trying to save yourself, but also trying to save your fiance. That's a real conflict.
Yeah. And that proves that they were putting pressure on him because,
I mean, just think about it, somebody that's really close to you, goes missing. And in most cases, it's somebody that, unless, a serial killer, and then that could just be happenstance. But then there's too many things where it's like, okay, well, looks like it's premeditated. So it wasn't a crime of passion. It was something that, a person or persons planned.
Right. Yeah. If it weren't for those strips of towel and stuff, it could have been like a random thing, but that definitely shows pre-planning.
Yeah, premeditation for sure. Dude, Okay.
Wow.
This is heavy.
Yeah. I mean, I immediately picture like a made-for-TV movie, that scene. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just
the circle,
powerful.
drawing the circle on the map.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, what a, you know, I mean, because the stuff that we're learning from Michael that we did not know, because it really wasn't much, there wasn't much about it in the paper as far as whether or not Ray was a suspect. I mean, of course, we know they're going to look at him. You know, I mean, that's natural. But knowing,
they looked at him hard and they pressured him. They
pressured
him.
That's right. Yeah. Just tell us. Come on. We know you did it. Just tell it. You know, they
make
pulled
you
all
feel
the
better.
typical tricks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he clearly didn't break. You know, but he knew that he was a suspect, clearly. And,
yes.
And so, you know,
and talk about a conflict within oneself, right? Just a weighty, difficult conflict that one
to deal with losing your fiance in that way, right, is mind-blowing enough and life-altering. But
and
then
now
on
you have
top
to defend
of that,
yourself.
Right. On top of that, you have to worry about being arrested.
Yeah. Now, you know, and I'll put it on the screen, you know that I did the same exercise as Ray.
Yes. As soon as you could.
As soon as I possibly could, yes. And it was much easier for me because we have Google Maps and we have Photoshop. And so it's
correct.
I don't have to use a compass.
You didn't have to use a compass.
Yeah. So one of the
What'd
things,
you find?
Well, what I found was Judy was found within that circle. Judy was found east, basically, on just off of Interstate 80. So what I kind of figured is if Ray was the murderer and he took his fiancée and he was just going to take her as far as he could and dump her, not dig a hole and bury her, but take her as far as he could and dump her.
Right.
He could have gone way past Weimar, way past Alta, Emmingen Gap, and still gotten back. And if you take into consideration the time that it would take to dig a shallow grave, put her in that, cover her up, he still could have gotten to Weimar, done that, and come back.
Well, and here's the thing that makes no sense to me. I mean, he was drawing that map and you were drawing that map based on a timeline that had already happened.
Yes.
If Ray was the one that did it, he doesn't need to call the police until the morning. And it would have been totally plausible.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So he could have bought himself so much more time.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to disparage Ray here. I'm just saying
No. I'm just saying
when Judy was discovered,
you know, when he drew that on the map, it was based on an actual timeline. But if he were the one who had did it, he could have made up the timeline.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Correct. But
so he wouldn't have called that.
I think the point I'm making is that when Judy was found, they probably again went, it's the boyfriend, it's the fiance.
Right. And I wonder what his reaction was when he realized that she was found in that circle.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess we get back into the interview.
Yes.
Yeah. I did find out that I do remember what my dad had said about the scraps, you know, whatever it was that they were used. It was, you know, something that was actually being used. I guess those bags were being used in the San Juan School District.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Now, is that something that your dad told you, or did you read that somewhere?
No, I do remember my father telling me about that. And then I talked to my other brother about it, and I asked him, and you know, he confirmed the same thing. He says there was only a couple of places, you know, that were local that actually, you know, those bags are made for, and the San Juan School District was one of them. So.
Yeah, we have not discussed the details about that on, you know, in our podcast or on our YouTube channel because we weren't sure. You know, we didn't want to just say stuff without, you know, because it wasn't really confirmed by the press. So it's interesting to hear that your dad said that. And
we asked the Sacramento sheriff specifically that question. The bag that she was found in, what was that used for the San Juan Unified School District? And they came back with no comment.
Yeah.
Rick, one of the things that we have not wanted to speculate on, that the internet has speculated on for years, is the canvas bag that Judy was found in.
Well, we didn't want to speculate in detail because we weren't sure that was.
We knew that she was found in a canvas bag.
Right.
Online, the speculation has been that it was made for the San Juan Unified School District. Now, Mike just told us that that is the case, and we haven't wanted to report that without finding some kind of corroboration, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Mike just told us that his dad told him that canvas bag was from the San Juan Unified School District. If I could just sidebar here for a second, I tried to confirm that with the Sacramento Sheriff's Office, and they elected not to confirm that for us, right? Either
maybe
they,
in another
they
50 years
know.
they will.
Yeah, in another 50 years maybe they will. But so we tried to confirm it, but we couldn't. Now we have some, I guess, circumstantial third-party confirmation. So
and the San Juan School District was huge.
Oh, San Juan Unified School District
Covered most of Sacramento, right?
Yes. And I don't know if people from outside of Sacramento. Sacramento is very much like any other kind of metropolitan, smallish area, in that it sprawls, right? Yeah. So, I am a student from San Juan Unified School District. I graduated from high school in Sacramento. Now, one of the things that people kind of get on the internet is, well, this was a San Juan Unified School District bag, then it must be somebody who worked for San Juan Unified School District or worked for the manufacturer or whatever. But what I kind of started thinking about overnight was, me and my 4 siblings, we all graduated in San Juan. If you go to my parents' attic right now, from activities we did or sports we played or PE or whatever, there's probably at least 5 large canvas bags from the San Juan Unified School District. No.
Okay, well, I'm 10 minutes from your parents, so I'll verify it.
But yeah.
Tell them I'm coming.
So I'm just saying that I don't know that it means anything, the canvas bag, because that canvas bag would have been in every family in the area.
It certainly lends to the speculation that the killer or killers were local.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, because like you said, it could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be, a coach, it could be all those things, but it definitely doesn't sound like it's a serial killer who's roaming back and forth across the country to have that bag.
I think that's right, because we have no indication. We know that, for example, Ray went to Hiram Johnson High School. He may have a San Juan Unified School District canvas bag, right? Right. Judy went to, where'd she go to? Mira Loma or something like that?
Yeah,
I can't remember, but she was in the school district as well.
Yeah, but why would either of them have that bag on them? Or, I mean, especially Judy, I think we could rule her out for having that bag with her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's normal for a 22-year-old to be carrying around their high school gym bag or something like that, right? So
yeah,
I think it probably came from somewhere else, but I don't think it points to. I think I agree with you that it points to the murderer being local, because you can't just buy those off the shelf somewhere, right?
Right. I mean, it's just another piece of the puzzle. And as we know, in these kind of cases, when there's no eyewitness or video or anything, every piece of the puzzle can take you in different directions, but that was interesting, like you said, to hear Michael confirm that, that it came from his dad's mouth. That was certainly of interest.
Mike, was the police, they continually, I mean, not always, but they continually checked in on your dad, right? And re-interviewed him and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was a long period of time. I would say, I mean, I was born in 1979, so I would say, I think I was maybe around 25, so that would have been about 15, 16 years ago. Police officer knocked at the door, my parents' home, and introduced himself as an investigator of, cold cases. And they were telling him that they were still looking, into, the Judy Hakari case. They asked him whether or not, he'd be willing to submit DNA, which he was perfectly fine with doing. I think the only one that had an objection with it was my mother, because my mom can get a little paranoid at times.
Well, that's understandable. That's pretty scary.
Yeah. So she's, And I says, Mom, they're not looking at him, I'm sure, So they did tell my father that they did like somebody for this crime, but, obviously couldn't give any specifics or information about, what, how what they think,
So
I'd really love to know that name.
Me too. But if they ask for a DNA sample, I mean, that implies that they're comparing it against something, right?
Right.
And when we asked Sacramento sheriffs if there was DNA, the answer was no comment. But I feel like there probably is DNA in this case if they're asking your dad to submit his DNA.
Well, the other angle that I came up with was that it could have been kind of a little trick to see how your dad reacted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That information about how they stayed in touch with Ray and came to his door, sounds like about 2005, 2006, maybe.
Yeah.
And asked for his DNA. I mean, I briefly said there, my first thought when I heard that from Michael about them asking for DNA is I thought it was like a way of seeing if they could trip Ray up. Because at that point, I mean, CSI had been on the air. People knew that DNA could get you arrested, right? I mean, it was very. I think by that time it was very well known. So, I think if they asked Ray, like, just came to his door, they didn't call him first, right? It was kind of like just springing.
That's what they did. They just came to the house.
Exactly, and I think doing that, it's almost an interrogation tactic. Like if they said, here we are, and we'd like a sample of your DNA. If he had done it, and I mean, most of the time, if someone's guilty, they're going to say, yeah, no, you can't take my DNA, or I need to talk to my attorney. Yeah. And that might have been an indication for them. So I think it was just, they were, I mean, I'm sure they wanted his DNA just to have it to either exclude him or match something. But I do think that it was both. I think they were definitely wanting to see his reaction.
Which, I mean, if you're right there, then at least on some level, Sacramento sheriffs were still saying, look at the fiancé, right? And of course, the case would have been passed from investigator to investigator over time.
Yes.
Right.
So they each want to have their own experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, but like Michael said, I mean, he willingly gave up his DNA immediately. So, and he obviously that he was never arrested. So, which means because we're still not clear on whether or not there is DNA to match to, but either way, he gave up the DNA, and there was no further discussion according to Michael. So, Gavin,
hey, Rick.
we've got some pretty cool news to share with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to introduce our new in-house detective. With this guy's got 25 years of experience. He's retired police captain from the San Francisco Bay Area. Joe Cefalu, let's introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, guys, first of all, for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so like you said, I did spend 25 years in law enforcement in the San Francisco Bay Area. I retired 2 months ago as a captain. It was a small agency, but I spent a lot of my time working in investigations. I did mostly person crime investigations, where robberies, homicides, assaults, gang cases, attempted murders, stuff like that. That's kind of where my bread and butter was. But I also did spend quite a bit of time working on some cold cases while I was there. I actually investigated. We had 4 cold cases that were open at the time. This was early 2000s. I actually ended up solving one from 1973.
Wow.
And actually got the case closed. It was a murder. Yeah, my experience when it comes to the cold case side of things is, I had a case where I was investigating a murder still unsolved in the jurisdiction that I worked from 81, and I opened it up and I started talking to people, and I came across this one guy, and I started talking to him, and he's like, oh yeah, it was a cocaine dealer, and he was his house where they were selling coke, and the girl was murdered inside. And he's like, oh yeah, I was a distributor. I was running 500 kilos a month up from Southern California, and I was buying it from this police officer down in Orange County area or Santa Ana or something like that. And he was like telling me this whole story. I went to jail and this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this guy's just has nothing to hide, right? He's like, hey, I'm not involved, but I'll speak freely. And I verified all his information.
Wow.
And it's like, as I started getting up the chain of this case, I got to a gentleman that I interviewed, and he came in willingly and talked to me. And in the middle of the interview, I said, hey, two things. I want to get a DNA sample from you, number one. And number two, what do you think about a lie detector test? And he said, I want my lawyer. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And he got up and left. And
now, do you like pre-plan how you're going to deliver it?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
So in that case, it was like Rick was saying that you're just kind of testing him on that.
Oh yeah. You
don't really necessarily care about the DNA.
No, not at all. In fact, I had no DNA evidence in the case whatsoever.
I mean, from what we had been told was that the rape kit that was in Auburn got lost. This was all previous to DNA testings.
Right.
But I was thinking what you had said, that could check out to kind of see how he would react, whether or not he would have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Also, I would think, I do believe there is some DNA for the Nancy, is it Benelak case?
Wow.
That's
we're not sure we're saying our own names right at this point.
I know. Well, listen, we were saying Hakari forever until you corrected us, and we confirmed you're right. It's Hakari. So whether it's Benelak or Benalik, it's Nancy.
Yeah, we've been saying Benalik, and that's what we're sticking with until we find out otherwise.
My family didn't know her, so which way that one's pronounced.
Okay, all right.
But I do remember hearing that there was DNA with that, and
yeah.
It happened, right down the street. My father said that he thought it was weird that he could look out and see the other apartment, from Judy Hoppery's apartment. It's that close, so if there's possibly.
Well, and we've said this a million times, but we have a little 1-minute video that I shot going from the Markston apartment complex to Nancy Benalik. And so if somebody wants to see how close those are, it's a really quick video they can watch on our channel.
Super fast. But I'm thinking maybe, who knows, if they can, if they got DNA, they could kind of cross-reference any DNA that was on that particular case as well and see if it pops up.
Yeah, because there were 5 or 6 or 7 cases happening all at the same time that
there were a lot that
on the surface seem very connected, and some of them still to me seem very connected. So you're right. Maybe they were trying to tie him to Judy's case through another case.
Well, here's a question for you, Michael. Did your dad ever tell you what he thought happened? Like, did he have any thoughts on that, ideas?
He did go ahead and tell me, and this was prior to the investigators talking to him. But for the longest time, whenever he would tell the story, he would tell me that he felt that there was a gardener that always had his truck. I guess he lived at the complex, but he thought that the gardener was a little bit weird, and that it was kind of. I can't. It's been such a long time. I can't tell you the exact reason why he felt suspicious of that person, but he does remember that when he got out of his Volkswagen to go into the apartment, his car was parked out there, or his truck.
The gardener's truck.
And then when he came out and found that Judy's car was there and she was gone, that truck was gone. The following day, the truck was back and it was muddy, so, and it was because it was raining the night before, he's like, well, where did that truck go? That could have gotten that muddy, then based on where they found Judy Hoppery, he kind of had a suspicion that I wonder if it could have been him because, well, I know that he was there before she was kidnapped. She was gone after, and the following day, the truck is muddy, it's like it's been, kind of off-roading or something.
I'm assuming he mentioned those things to the police.
Yeah, he did, but the police did check out, this guy, and they said that, it didn't look like, he, I don't know if he had an alibi or what, but it wasn't something that they really looked at closely.
Interesting.
What are the things in those cases that like rule out a suspect, like non-Hollywood, non-TV? What are the things like if
especially back then when there was no technology?
Yeah, if a fiancé comes to you and says, "Hey, listen, I'm suspicious of the gardener. he's always been looking at Judy funny, and he likes to park next to her car, and he thinks she's beautiful, and it was there at 11 o'clock when I got there, and it was not there at 1:45 when I came out, and those are not his working hours. And then, the next day it showed up muddy, like he'd been out somewhere. What does the police officer or the investigator do with that in order to rule in or rule out that suspect?
Well, hopefully they would interview him and establish an alibi. So where were you? What did you do? And then go ahead and confirm that. So if he says I was home all night by myself, that's a little suspicious, because now you could say, but your truck was gone between this hour and this hour. Where were you? Well, I was with so-and-so at the bar. And then you have to go back and you have to go to the bar, and you have to nail down their time frame and their alibi. So that'd be the first thing you do. And well, back then there was no video surveillance, so you weren't able to. I was at the so-and-so bar. Well, you can't go to the bar and pull video surveillance.
No ATM cameras.
no ATM cameras, but there may be a receipt. Maybe there's a receipt from the bar or the liquor store or wherever that person said they were. And so that's what you have to do. You have to track down their alibi, and you have to follow it up with hard evidence.
How important would it be for him to have found out what happened?
Really important. It was something that really bothered him his entire life. It was never, something that I think he ever truly got over. So he, like I said, that's a life-changing event. Everything from that point, in that evening had changed for him. His life would have ended up totally different. So I could probably be empathetic and kind of, think that, if I was in that situation, I think I would probably wonder what my life would have been, if that thing had not have happened.
Has there been any other contact with the Hakari family?
After Evelyn Hakari, I believe she died of a stroke, and then Willow, I think, was shortly thereafter. He hasn't talked to, well, yeah, he's not going to talk to him now, but he hadn't talked to Michael for a long time, and like I said, I says, if you should reach out and talk to him. And, he was always feeling that, I feel like every time that, I go visit, or if I contact them, I'm just a constant reminder of their daughter being murdered. So he just, kind of let it go.
How did you come across and decide to reach out to us?
So I, obviously have, my own vested interest in the case. I'd like to see it solved, or, some semblance of, or at least more information is also great too, But like I was saying earlier, that I'm the direct result, to that situation from happening, So, it's one of those things that, it's like I've always liked, true crime things, So I definitely would like to see this one solved. But, I kind of feel like, wherever my dad is, I'm sure that, he knows what happened now, but now it's just the rest of us that, would like to know what actually happened.
So you were doing a search and came across us? Is that how?
Yeah, it was. I type in Judy's name, and a lot of times you get a lot of information that pop up. When I first started looking at this about 10 years ago, there was not a whole heck of a lot. I was able to find some information that even my father hadn't heard of, at that point. But come to find out that information has long since not been correct. So it'd be nice to be able to actually read the actual police reports. If they could, let us.
Oh man,
yeah,
you're talking my language there. I on the one hand, we have to be sympathetic, right? The police want to solve the crime too. They want to solve the crime, but at what point do you start letting the cat a little bit out of the bag, some more clues, so that other people can work on it and help you,
Yeah. I think that this is a case that, is so old that, I think that, you would want to, obviously you don't want a lot of people that, are kind of like what happened with the Zodiac. We had all sorts of people calling up saying that they were the Zodiac killer. You wouldn't want to have a bunch of people, trying to give bad information to make this cold trail even worse, but, so I kind of understand it in that regard. But yeah, I think that, the investigators are investigating it. Both victims, Judy and my father and her parents, are all gone. I think Michael's the only one that's left.
Right.
And for all we know, the people that did this, are have long since been gone too. So I don't see a problem with with being able to look into it. I was online earlier today, and I was just kind of looking at a few things, and came across a blog site, and they were talking specifically about my dad, and the fact that in my grandmother's will, there was a portion of it, went to the Nurses, Foundation charity.
Oh, wow.
And they, kind of insinuated that, was that just, being, generous, or was that guilt, and I'm like, well,
Oh, come on.
I know I'm like, my grandmother was a nurse. That was her profession.
Oh, was it really? Oh, wow.
So in her will, when she passed away, she donated part of the estate to the Judy Hakari Memorial Scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, yeah, it was just, and as they thought an awful lot of Judy, as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's what it was.
Yeah, another weird tidbit, my brother, he's a nurse, and the reason, being is because of, my grandmother and Judy Hakari,
Wow.
Wow.
So,
that memorial fund has done a lot of good. We reached out to Sac State, and, during the craziness that is trying to run a university in the middle of COVID-19, they got back to us with some information on that.
Oh, that's good.
They had
it's still alive and going.
It's still going, yeah. And I spoke with a woman named Isla at the Finlandia Club, and she told me that at some point in the recent past, they stopped donating to the fund. She wasn't sure why, if that was, it was funded, it was already well funded or something like that. But I think I kind of, from the data that we got, I guessed that over the course of that, from the 1971 school year to 2020, Sac State has awarded about $195,000 to the nursing program. And if we kind of adjust that for inflation every year, that's the equivalent of well over $300,000.
Oh, nice.
So that was 2 weeks ago, we never would have dreamed of having an interview like that.
Yeah. And we got clues. We got some good clues out of that.
Absolutely. Well, this, the bones of the case are starting to, we're starting to get some flesh on there, and they're starting to fill out a little bit and giving us a more complete picture.
How cool is that about Ray's grandma when she passed away, giving part of her estate to the
fact that she was a nurse, and Ray's brother was a nurse?
Mike's brother, so Ray's son is a nurse.
Okay. Right. So yeah, that stuff is just, I think that's great. And clearly she, Judy was about to be part of their family, so clearly she was fond of her, and probably thought it was pretty cool that that Ray was engaged to a nurse, and so it's all, and the fact that she donated part of her estate to Judy's the nursing fund is just, I think that's a testament to the to the family.
Yeah. That scholarship fund has done some real good in the Sacramento region. So I think that's a good place to wrap this episode up. Our next episode is going to be something very similar to this. Yes. We've already recorded it. We need to go through the editing process, but
we kind of mentioned it the last episode, and so we have another exclusive interview with the birth daughter of Carol Beth Hilburn, who was killed the same year as Judy,
in a similar fashion.
Similar, yep.
Yeah. So join us on the next episode. And
stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe.
Yeah, we've got some good information coming.
Thanks for listening to the Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin podcast. Please subscribe to stay up to date with the cases we feature. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin, for more details and visuals that we can't provide here. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. If you have information on this or any of the cases that we feature, or if you'd like to join the discussion in our case forums, please visit solvecrimeswithrickandgavin.com.